Welcome to Beneath the Surface with TJ Woodward and Rachel Kove. In a world that often moves quickly and stays on the surface, this is a space where we slow down and turn inward. Together, we explore what lives beneath our stories, our reactions, and the ways we've been conditioned to see ourselves, others, and the world. We dive into themes of recovery, trauma, identity, polarization, and conscious living. Let's begin. Welcome back. So excited to be here with my good friend and colleague, Rachel Kove, to continue the conversation beneath the surface. In our last episode, we talked about shame, and we talked about we started to talk about how we heal it. So in this episode, we're going to go beneath the surface and talk about connection and presence. Rachel, here we go.
Oh, I'm so excited about this one. You know, it's really about creating safe connection.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. Because most people in society right now are healing a nervous system that did not experience safe connection.
That's right.
Love felt conditional for a lot of children that are adults now.
And when we disconnect from our true nature, because we come into the world, as we've already talked about, as whole, complete, and perfect beings. And if that doesn't work for someone, we at least come in as a blank canvas, right? And we start to absorb. And one of the things that is important, if not the most important thing, is safe connection.
Safe.
When in conscious recovery, the model I've created, I talk about creating safety as the first important step of recovery. And when people hear that, they often think of external safety, which is important, but we're also talking about creating deep connection with ourselves.
Yeah, well, initially, external safety is primary. Because if I'm in a room and people are attacking me, my brain is going to focus on the people around externally that are attacking me. I always use this as a reference in my groups that I run. If you are living in a home with a tiger, a wild tiger, right? If I'm watching a really good show right now, or having a really good conversation, but someone just told me there's a tiger on the loose in the home, a wild tiger, right? My brain is going to focus on how do I stay alive? If there's a wild tiger in the house, right? I'm not focusing on what's in front of me right now. And people wonder what ADHD is. If your wild tiger are your primary caregivers.
Well, and also you named it, it's also the nervous system, especially for a little person, because again, our brains aren't even fully developed. So yes, there's a thought of a wild tiger, but there's also just that reactivity, that response or that reaction where our nervous systems naturally want to protect ourselves. That's where fight, flight, or freeze comes in.
Yeah.
And most of us develop one way to work with that. And some of us grew up with wild tigers.
I would say a lot of us did. And I really have a theory around this. And I've been working in mental health for 16 years. I've been working in the field of addiction for 16 years. I've worked with thousands of people. I've worked with every race, every ethnicity, every socioeconomic background, people that are billionaires, people that grew up making, $100 a week, people that grew up on the streets, people that were prostitutes, people that were gangbangers, people that were celebrities. I've grown up in immense amount of wealth around me, and I've also had no money in my life. The common theme is this. I did not live in a home where I had safe caregivers. Now, I don't always mean physically safe caregivers,
That's right.
Emotionally safe caregivers. And when I track this in history, I've been curious, how did this happen? Well, if I'm living in World War I or World War II, and my whole body and brain is focused on how do I keep me alive and my children alive, emotions are secondary. They're not primary. So when you're in a state of survival, like when you're in war, and I work with an immense amount of first responders, so I've had a lot of conversations about this. When you're in war and you're worried about how do I keep my child alive, how do I keep my body alive, and you feel something called sadness, you have to push that away in that moment. And in that moment, yes, it could be considered a waste of time, because I talk a lot about this with the first responders when they're on the job. They cannot focus on their emotions in the moment. And it's not just first responders. It's any of us who are working. We have to put our emotions somewhere else sometimes to prioritize the job, the kid, the relationship, right? So just to finish that piece, if we did not have emotionally safe parents, we did not build a safe relationship to our emotions growing up.
One of the most powerful moments really in my life, I was doing a clinical training outside of Austin, and this particular treatment program worked mostly with veterans. And the person who I'm going to tell this story about was a veteran and a therapist or a counselor at this program. And as we were exploring what we're exploring now, not so much cerebrally, but experientially, he said something that was so simple and yet so profound. He just began to get teary. And of course, I'm going to pause and say, are you willing to share what's coming up? And he said, for the first time, I understand. I grew up in a war zone, so I chose one.
Woo! Ugh.
And something in him shifted because he understood that. Yes, there was PTSD from being active military. It started much earlier. And there was an extensive study done on PTSD. And the question was asked, why do some people experience a traumatic event as an adult and not get PTSD symptoms? I want to be clear. I know there are multiple layers, but one of the primary indicators was early childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. Because what he said is so powerful. He grew up in a war zone and then chose one.
Yeah. Well, we, in my opinion, are drawn to what's familiar for survival purposes, right? I need to know my route and my pathway to get to where the food is, right? I need to know and study where the wild animals are that are predators in the jungle. I need to know when they hunt so I can avoid them, right? I need to understand the weather. I need to understand people's behaviors so that I know what's familiar, so I could understand patterns, right? Because it's what's familiar. It's what keeps me alive, right? It's predictable. If I can predict and prevent the worst case scenario from happening, right, then I can avoid dying, right? So whatever is familiar is predictable. There's a sense of relief in whatever is kind of predictable because the unknown to human beings feels very overwhelming, stressful, and scary, especially if you don't have any type of connection and relationship to something, to presence, to universal presence, right? So if I grew up in such chaos, then that's familiar. We will attract what's familiar because there's relief in what's familiar, even if what's familiar is completely chaotic, stressful, provokes and creates an immense amount of adrenaline, right? They did a study that a brain of someone that comes back from war and a brain of a child that grows up in an unsafe home where there's an immense amount of stress, it's the same brain.
That's right.
And I'm so grateful for what neuroscience is now proving.
Well, and what I want to take a deeper dive since we're going beneath the surface here, because what we know to be true is we actually change our brain. So I love neuroscience, and yet some people in that world think, therefore, that's the causation. That's what caused it. But I want to say we actually caused the brain to do that because of the experience. Now, they're starting to understand that. In other words, we often say things like, well, we call addiction now a brain disease. That's the new terminology.
Is it really?
It's classified as a brain disease. And so the assumption there is that it's organic and biological and therefore we can't change it. We know that's not true. We actually create the brain. Now the brain, we come in with the brain doing what the brain does, but it also gets affected by traumatic experiences and by consciousness itself. And what I mean by that is we know we create new neural pathways. Usually we say through behaviors. So when we become uncomfortable and try something new, we create a new neural pathway. But it's through consciousness itself. How do I see myself and how do I see the world? And what you're speaking to is so important because when we grow up in this war zone, Yes, we end up choosing it because it's familiar, but there's even something deeper happening. It's because it's all I think I deserve.
Oh my God. It's so deep. It's so layered.
So layered.
Well, what you said is so profound. I'm consciousness. I'm not this human body. I'm not this brain. I'm not my emotions. I'm the awareness of all of that. And I learned that. I forgot what spiritual teacher I learned that from. And I thought it was so profound when I understood that, because it also gave me a lot more choice in what I want to create here. If I'm not my past, if I'm not my trauma, if I'm not my emotions, and what if all of this is for me to create whatever I desire from within, right? That's pretty powerful.
It's extremely powerful. And this is like the heart of conscious recovery, because I create the world based on how I see myself and the world. And most often that's unconscious.
Yeah.
And it's coming from the unresolved traumatic experience that creates a disconnection from our true nature, and therefore a core of shame, or a shame core. And when I have that experience, then I believe I am my thoughts, I am my emotions, I am my past, and I am my trauma. What we want to be careful with, and I know you and I have these nuanced conversations, is we want to acknowledge and have compassion for that. And yet what you're saying is the key to freedom. When I shifted from I am my thoughts to I have thoughts, I am my past to I have a past, I am my addiction, because I used to say over and over again, I am an alcoholic every day, and I was creating the neural pathway. Now, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, but it creates a certain pathway. And for me, that meant, and I know not everyone's going to agree with this, but for me, that meant, therefore I'm broken. I have this disease. There's something wrong with me. And I kept repeating it over and over and over again. To be nuanced about it, we want to acknowledge, and I know you do this masterfully because I've seen you at work. We want to acknowledge and have compassion for the person. We don't want to do the bypass and say, well, what if you're not your past? We want to say, great, now let's feel that. And then also introduce the possibility that it's what I have, not who I am.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for saying that. It's honoring the past.
Yeah.
We're very attached to our stories. We're very attached to our traumas. I was very attached to being the alcoholic. I was very attached to being the recovered alcoholic. And to be honest with you, it kept me really, really limited in what I was able to create. It kept me really unwell. I don't even like the word unwell, because then the opposite of, these words can sometimes be very controlling. I felt very trapped as an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to prove to everybody that I was an alcoholic, or I had to prove the recovered alcoholic. It became an identity. It became an identity that I could attach myself to. And I think when people really start this journey of expanding one's consciousness, one starts to detach from identity, because identity can be very limiting.
Yes.
And yet identity is attached to ego, and ego is attached to survival, right? Maintaining an image, and that's all okay. But recognizing that's what it is really important.
And that's the freedom. And I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's even more important. That is, there's a place within me that's one with the universal energy, right? There's a place within me that's unharmed and unharmable. And to make contact with that, or to have an awareness, because you use the word awareness, and a very wise person once said there are only 3 steps to this: awareness, awareness, and awareness, right? I'm aware that there's this place within me, because most people, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, even clinicians, even therapists, even counselors, are trained in some way, whether we say it or not, to look at the person as broken or damaged, and our job is to help fix them. Even though we don't really use that language, there's a message there because of the diagnosis, because of the way we see the person. When we say, what if there's a place within you that's unharmed and unharmable? What if making contact with that and having awareness of that is the first step? Because that's true safety. That's true connection. That's true presence, because presence with a capital P is not I'm in the moment with you. Presence with the capital P is the universal presence. When I understand that's who and what I am, then working with the trauma is very different. Working with the shame is very different. Because if I believe I'm broken, then we, of course, will say things like, she's not ready to heal her trauma yet.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love the language that you use, and that's what makes you so special. You're so special with how you articulate the language of consciousness, the language of the universe, and connecting it to the human relationship, to humans, to oneself. And contact with that part is everything. And for some people, it's so abnormal. It was abnormal for me. It was completely abnormal for me. And also, if you are raised in such chaos, one resists that idea, right? Because there is this attachment to identity.
Yep.
There is this attachment to chaos. There's attachment to how you see me. There's also attachment to control.
Yeah. Well, and there's an attachment to my own brokenness. So as you were talking, I was thinking about my first mentor, Mary Helen, and she was this beautiful, gentle, awakened being that I hadn't ever experienced at that point anyone so alive, awakened, and present. And she would say to me, darling, you're so precious. And I would literally feel like I was going to throw up.
Yeah.
Because I was out of touch with that truth that she was speaking.
Yeah.
Because that truth is true for everyone. I want to be clear. Everyone at their core is this.
Yeah.
And to know that and to see that is so powerful, because it wasn't so much that she tried to talk me into that. It was that when she saw me that way, something started to thaw out. First resistance, like you said, like, no, that can't be true because I'm broken. Don't tell me I'm precious. Don't tell me I'm whole and complete. And yet with conscious recovery, when I introduce this, I have witnessed clients breaking down crying because it touches a deeper truth that's beyond the chaos and beyond the programming. What if there's a place within you that's whole and perfect? What if there's a place that's unharmed? I've witnessed someone's entire physiology and entire body shift right before my eyes.
Yeah, I have too. And I experience it every time I go to Emergence.
Yeah.
I really do. It's such a safe place for connection, for presence. It's a safe place for community, and it's a safe place for the individual. It's a safe place for one to be an individual in a group.
Yeah.
And to feel like you belong while also remaining in contact with who you are as your own separate individual. And that is very important, because I don't want to dishonor my story. Who I am is a culmination of thousands and millions of little moments of my history. And that's why I love storytelling. That's why I love acting. That's why I love writing. Being a human is a story. I started writing a song recently. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a middle, beginning, and end. We're all in each other's stories, trying to rush through the middle to get to the end. And it's this reminder of we're all in each other's stories in different moments of our own stories and journeys. And being human is hard. And it's painful. And a lot of us have been doing it without any guidance. And that's the problem. We've lost rites of passage in modern day society. We have lost guidance that honors the individual soul, that honors the human experience and honors the soul of the human experience. And that is what we need to get back to, is you are your own person, having your own individual experience in a society of other people. And we need to learn how to remain in that connection to being human, connected to our soul, while being in community. And that does take a lot of skill when you're not just living on the land.
That's right.
You're not just living on the land. You're living in a pool of opinions, of social media, of work, of needing to go earn a living, of raising children, of being constantly bombarded by clips of tragedy around the world. There's a lot to that.
Yes. And I feel like this is the perfect way to like close this segment out because there's so much more we can say, and we're going to say it in future episodes. But what I want to say kind of in closing, first of all, is just thank you. Thank you for bringing that piece in particular, because I feel like that's a segue into what we can talk about next. How do we stay centered in today's culture? And how do we pause and reflect? Because people say things like, take a spa day, take some time off. But if I'm still in, my nervous system is still like, in fight, flight, or freeze, I don't actually tap into true presence. So once again, thank you so much, Rachel. And for everyone else watching and listening, we are so excited to continue this conversation on our next episode, and we'll see what the topic is. But one thing we do know is it'll be a dive beneath the surface.